phantom or specter, a menace or friend. Curious tales of the unnatural kind. Welcome to Eidolon. Hey everyone, welcome to Eidolon. I'm Amy. Thanks for coming back for another episode. We're going to take it to Albany, New York once again, where Ryan and I are from, to talk about something that has to do with a haunted house, myself, and a night with a psychic. Buckle up. So my story starts in 2010. This was now 12 years ago. And it concerns a person I used to be friends with as well, who partook in this situation with me because she was my friend. And it came about simply because of where she worked. Now, let's go back. In 2010, this friend and I, we had known each other since high school. So we had a lot of history together. We had spent a lot of time together. And she's one of the people who, when I was younger, told me some of the spookiest ghost stories of her and her siblings' lives when they were younger. I won't disclose her name or anyone's name that has to do with this, but myself and my friend, I will call her Hannah for this, had one heck of a time when we delved into psychic phenomena and hauntings at a local, mildly reputably haunted location, an historic house in Albany County. Because of where Hannah worked, she got these local Albany flyers, kind of these pamphlets of different courses for adult learning and further education. And now and again, something interesting would come up in these catalogs. One day she texted me from her job and said she'd found a course she wanted us to take, and it was 2 nights. The first night was at a classroom, and I think it was some sort of public facility or building that could be rented. I honestly don't remember where it was. And the second night was at a place that I had been familiar with and had much to do with in my life already, to investigate the paranormal. So me, being over a decade younger than I was now, which means also over a decade more inexperienced than I am now, I absolutely jumped at this chance. So we paid the fee, which actually, I think she got these flyers because the office that put these things out and put these different events on and classes on was in the building she worked. So we signed up immediately. And the first night took us to, I remember being in the classroom, and I remember that my friend Hannah had gotten myself and her fresh, clean notebooks, and that hers was yellow and mine was red. And these were the notebooks for taking notes during this evening's instruction in psychic phenomena and the paranormal. It was really kind of open-ended, I recall. I wish I still had the paperwork, but again, listen to how long ago this was. And I remember sitting in the second row, I think, first or second row, super excited. And we attended this course on phenomena put on by a fairly well-known regionally psychic. I had other friends who would go to this person for advice and for therapy, and speak to them often, actually. So this person was fairly well known. So we get to the class, and having already been somewhat familiar, in thanks somewhat, obviously, to the show Ghost Hunters, which was just ripping on the airwaves of Sci-Fi Channel, and having been interested in the paranormal already and all through college, you know, I felt like I was writing down or taking notes on things that I had already some mild familiarity with, and it was not necessarily information that by any means was wrong, but it was very basic, as I recall. And I remember feeling like my friend and I, we looked at each other like, oh, we know this. We know the definition of poltergeist. And this person leading the course also had, well, I guess, kind of a very love and light based, a very blanket statement, love and light based view of the paranormal. And I am not saying that that's wrong or bad, but it definitely doesn't include a lot of possibility. And I think it leaves out some important points on psychology and why we experience things and why we interpret things the way we do, and what things scare us and why, why they might not have to. And there was just a very mystical aspect overall without any room for any other type of interpretation. But that was just, I mean, it was so very Paranormal 101, as I recall. Now, I still do have that notebook. However, it was only 1 page of notes that we took, and I think the entire one night of course took maybe 40 minutes. I don't remember being there very long at all. Some people had some questions. It was probably, 10 people total. I guess I expected a lot more, and as I recall, it put a lot more of us on the spot when the person asked questions, or tried to engage us, and me being mid-20s and, still pretty shy then, I wasn't about to volunteer too much information. But that changed on the second night when we were to go to this, again, mildly haunted location. I say mildly because there's lore and legend associated with the building, and there has been for decades, before me investigating there. And however, I had been there, but not in the context of paranormal. I had been there for a tea party when I was in the Girl Scouts and around age 5 or 6, and I have memories of it, and I have memories of taking a photo on the stairs outside. And so I knew of the place, and I knew, I think, only one of the haunting stories, which is of, a woman in white, which we know it's very tropey. We know there are more depths to these women and their particular colors, but that was and is to this day one of the stories that's carried in that house and told usually in October. And it's part of the history of the home, in that it was utilized and taught and thought about and investigated and interacted with for several years. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it adds to how this home has gone through its life and how these spaces reflect what goes on in our culture in our day-to-day, and how we view what we fear. It always comes back to, what are we afraid of and why? It's so much of this. But so the first night was this classroom setting. I don't remember everything correctly, but if we went back, I know it would be, for someone who's never had any clue about the paranormal or even watched one of the TV shows, many fewer TV shows on then about this kind of topic. I think there was a week in between. No, was it the next night? I think it was the next night. Within short order, the next portion of the class was to show up at this reputedly haunted location, and it was a little bit lecture, a little bit seance. And again, this medium they're known so widely and without any, to my knowledge, a bad word said about them. So I should preface this by, my weird night has nothing to do with how this person, a self-proclaimed psychic medium, presented their information and how this night went. But I recall coming into this home, and there were very few people, and the person in charge at the time at the home, they stayed there. They stayed in a room away from where we were, I guess I could say, conducting the seance. And the person in charge of this home at the time allowed us to have a single burning candle in a golden candlestick. And I remember that being, I think it was a source of contention later, but nothing happened. It was absolutely, you have 10 people watching this flame very close, because the flame was being used and utilized for the sake of divination and interpretation within the flame's movement, per what this psychic was asking and per what we were all asking. As I'm saying it, I'm remembering the person went around the room and allowed each of us to ask a different question, and we would interpret the flame's movement. And they talked about how this sort of divination is something that's so common with spirits. We were all in this beautiful parlor, carpeted. I know, again, burning candle, carpeted room, very old historic home. It's not the best look, but it was a successful night. In an alternate universe, it was an unsuccessful night. Something's very different in several different universes, but the one I experienced went fine. So you have to imagine it's 10 people, all grown adults. I think myself and Hannah were the youngest people in this group, and that's also something that struck me. Like, aren't there people who are still within sort of academia or aren't there people our age that are psyched about this and want to learn about this? And I remember being surprised it was mostly people much older than myself and her. And there's 10 of us around. There was no table in between us. This is a parlor with like some nice old furniture, swing-back couches, settees, and whatnot. And this person the psychic was in the middle of all of us, kind of talking as they turned around to tell us about what the different colors of orbs meant and how red ones were far more aggressive, but never evil. And I recall that being kind of deterring. Any negativity is still as maybe damaging or problematic in the paranormal. There's no possibility of maybe something that just doesn't interact well or doesn't have any want to do with ourselves, and we catch that at the wrong time and it feels awful. Maybe we're, placing, it wants to kill us type of idea into the wrong place. But I felt like that was still just a strange, if you see a red orb, you have to know immediately it's going to hurt you. It was just like, oh, wait, what? So I remember them explaining, this is the thing that stuck with me so long. It was weird, because if I were to express this kind of logic that I'm about to tell you now in the paranormal, I think I would be destroyed on every social platform and called a clown. This person explained to the whole group of us as they were like turning in a circle, standing in the middle. There was no table or any other instruments, but this one candle that they were holding. So thankfully they were holding it. It wasn't, on that carpet. And they explained what the different colors of different orbs mean. And it was all seemingly, a rainbow of spectrum and how they mean different things. It was very much like when you go to a psychic fair and you get an aura photo taken and they explain the different color interpretations. It was very much like that, with, of course, white orbs being the most pure and innocent and friendly and benign, and they could very well be angels, was what this was attributed to. And I wish I'd had the presence of mind to look around the room and see other people's reactions so that I could remember that for now, for later. Is this right? Does everybody know this? That's where my brain went. Is this something people like this person know? Is this something they all tell other people in classes and, continuing education courses and conventions? And is this something we're going to hear in pop culture? And who's surprised? I don't think I ever really heard that again, besides something like, red orbs are aggressive in some way, or dark, or I'm sure someone has used the word evil. I'm sure it's been on TV, it expressed in that manner in some way. But obviously this information seems very, very stereotypical, or an umbrella of quickly Googled New Age terminology almost. It was like they were aligning orbs with chakras. I think I figured that out later, oh, all right, that's interesting. And I mentioned that this was kind of odd because at that point in the evening, I think we'd been there this was much longer, at least an hour. We had several hours in that building. And at partway through, this person, they weren't channeling, but they were definitely expressing how they could feel different entities in the building. And they were talking about the very specific people who owned and lived in the building and their family members coming around and interacting with different people in the group. But of course, this was only as they saw it. I remember it registering kind of strangely and thinking, is it because this person has a skill set? Does this person have some sort of power and everyone else is we're just so new and at the whim of hauntings that we can't see this stuff? But the psychic medium focused heavily on orbs and seeing different colors of light, and wouldn't you know it, halfway through the evening, several people in that circle, dimly lit by that one candle, were seeing different orbs of light around them. And then the psychic would kind of almost reinforce it by saying, oh, I see that and this is what it means. And then they would start interpreting it immediately. And I remember being not turned off by it. I was interested in the whole thing. I was watching, but it almost, yeah, I have to say it almost felt like watching a performance unfold that seemed ad-libbed or improv on the basis of the participants, the audience directing the way this night was being interpreted. And there were I don't remember any other piece of equipment. There were no recorders, no EMF meters, none of that was in the room. It was just this human and a candle and several other humans around them in uncomfortable chairs, hoping for something paranormal. At least that's where I came from. I wanted something to happen. But what ended up happening is the psychic eventually turned to me and said that the deceased person who was most present in that home and most powerful in that home had a special liking to me and was very interested in me and was glad that I was there. And that sat with me for a long time in a weird way. I guess I'm glad it happened, but I think for a long time I wish it hadn't, because it played into how I investigated later in that same place, and I almost wonder how much that clouded everything from there forward. Now, another thing that this psychic medium instructed everybody during that second night was to envision a white light around them. Now, that's obviously something you're going to hear and have heard well before me, well after me, and has no bearing on this person or anything else. But that's something that definitely also, it's fine. I don't want to say it's normal, but it's something you hear so often, and it's a visualization that is so accepted in the weird community, that I think that was one of the things Hannah and I were like, oh yeah, we've heard this. I think we probably heard it, honestly, from Michelle Belanger at some point, especially in that, pop culture realm of the early aughts, mid to late aughts, 2010. That was definitely one of the other things that stuck with me, though, because I know I'd heard it from other sources, and I think, it depends on how reliable you find a source you see on the television. Like, oh, I like this person, they seem reasonable, they've written books, they're reputable. I think that one stuck with me because I was like, oh, this psychic medium reinforced what I'd heard in this place and that place, and those, books I found in the back of the library in, 1996. But I wonder how much that evening stuck with me and affected the way I took in the paranormal and experiencing and investigating it for years afterward. And I wonder if I'd come at it from a different, if I would have come at the paranormal from a different place after that, had that night never happened. Obviously, once again, other dimensions hold that information. Infinite possibilities are playing out elsewhere. I do not have the capability at this point, anyway, to tap into those dimensions. I don't think I do. If I do, and I don't know, maybe those are my ghost stories. But I wonder how I would now interpret the paranormal had I not had this uncanny primer from a psychic medium. And I wanted to tell this story because I think it just speaks to how widely uncontrollable interpretation is. And my same experience with that person over those 2 nights could be a completely different experience for any number of the people also in those rooms with me, listening to the same words. And all the different things that they've taken in their lives, the different things that I have in my life history, what makes us believe or not believe, and how does it prime us? Are there places in our thinking and in our perceptions, our worldviews, we only know what we know, but are there places where we have vulnerabilities, where this information has a stronger or weaker or stranger or even sometimes damaging influence on how we go forward and how we interact with the weird? It may not be something, it's not something I necessarily took into account in my everyday life, because I wasn't looking for different colored orbs of light. And I've seen one once that was like, what the hell is that? And I don't really go looking for that. I think when I'm looking for the paranormal, when I'm using my eyes on an investigation, I'm looking more for shadows and movement that doesn't make sense rather than lights, just because, again, in my own experience, it's just been so rare. And I wish it weren't that way. That'd be dope, to see floating orbs of light and be like, oh, this one's this or that. But I think those very definitive interpretations that were given to me at that age were a vulnerability point that got into my brain and made me question the intentions of the unexplained, where I didn't need to be questioning the intention so much as questioning my reaction and what could cause that. What did we do to influence this? What about this place? What are we missing from that picture? Rather than something is out to get me, or it's not out to get me. And I think that very binary thinking kind of followed me through my earlier deep dive in the paranormal, and that's a little, I don't want to say it's like sad or upsetting, but that's unfortunate. Again, I wouldn't be me without all the me stuff that I went through, clearly, but that can be a weird clouding experience. I think it can make a little bit of an odd fog to work through, especially if you have no other resource to clear that fog. It's kind of the fog of the unknown of the unknown. You don't know what you don't know in the paranormal, and boy, who knows what, Not a whole lot of nothing, I guess. I don't know. We're all at an I don't know. At least myself and Ryan are at big I don't know. Could be anything. But I think that has a way of clouding the I don't know in a way that's very hard to get out from under. And I'm glad to see only more resources now available. Obviously, social media picked up because that was right at the go ahead of smartphones and everybody seeing everybody's lives consistently to the point of everybody's salad. Why do we really want to see what each other are eating? What the fuck? All right. But without the resources now, back then, I didn't have a lot of, how do I look for all this other, basically. I remember, I think I had just ghostvillage.com, still a great resource. We get Jeff's calendar every year. So I'm only more glad to see more resources available for people to just kind of check their own brains. This night at this mansion was not bad by any means, but it might have put me in a weird place to go forward in the paranormal as effectively as I could have. But hey, I took a course, paid a little fee, had a night with a friend, and it was one of my first, I guess, formal seances, which is, I guess that's nice. Nothing wrong with that. So, well, no, I'd done that before, but it was the first in a place like where it was, with a reputable haunted story to it, and that was pretty neat. I don't know. It's the paranormal, a grain of salt with everything you take in. But that was my night with my 2 nights, with a psychic, a haunted mansion, and an alleged entity that found me, of this whole group of continuing education adults, very interesting. Me again, extra weird insight, and I have another instance that I'm gonna share. I'm going to do so without ever saying anybody's actual real name, but it's absolutely a true story, because this last one that I just talked about, this episode's from 2022, and the instance that I talked about is from like 2010 or something. So it had been a minute. But if you were to think that other really bizarre situations that left kind of emotionally strange imprints on anyone involved didn't occur in the years from that one until this present moment, you'd be insane, because there have been some weird moments. And I do want to preface this by being like, hey, I'm not here to tell this story in order to judge any of the people involved or make it so they are perceived wrong or anything like that. This is more to just explain this situation that occurred with several different people and what that can be psychologically, and how these things can happen, and it can be a really
it's almost hard to articulate like the feelings that there's cringe. Like I tell this story, I remember this memory in my mind and my guts cringe inside me because thinking of it, because it's just so absurd to have witnessed and lived through and been like, wait, what the fuck? So this is another what the fuck encounter that occurred in a haunted place with people participating in what they believe to be unseen forces and the potential control or influence those things may have on people when they believe with their whole chest and their whole mind and they're ready to believe. And that is what I was able to witness a night in, I forget, 2012, 2013, somewhere in there. This is when I was on a paranormal team with people, and this was a night where a spiritualist recently joined and was handing out packets of information on what they believed and the history of it. And there was another person there, like this was like a team meeting, but there was someone there who was intent on joining the team, and this was their first time being around everyone or meeting everyone. And it happened to be during this really absurd moment where this other person had recently joined the team and was giving lessons on spiritualism and the National Spiritual Alliance. And so you have this group of random people, and this one fresh new person is quite young and wants to join the team. And the first instance they are getting is this whole download of information on clairvoyance, clairaudience, mediumship, abilities, what spirit can do, all sorts of information that comes from a very fully belief-driven individual and school of thought and faith and ideology. So it's kind of the situation itself is it appears it could be a bit overwhelming to someone, perhaps if they have never had too much beyond several, Google searches and stories of things they can't quite explain in their home, something like that. They've only taken in the pop culture of whatever paranormal there is. And there's a lot of people who don't watch every ghost show out there that's ever been on in the last 20 years, and they didn't come with a ton of knowledge or information or background in the paranormal. So as far as belief goes, they're ready to believe more without questioning it out of a lack of experience or reflection on it, and also trusting the people around them. And I tell you that because I was also a person in that position years prior to that. I recognized that this was a new person coming in. We had a normal evening of listening to this person, this spiritualist person, go through all of their information. I think, better part of an hour at least. And then most of the other people leave. They got to go home. It's getting late. We're all in an historic building that has, I'll tell you now, I believe it is haunted. My husband believes it is haunted. There are other people who believe it is haunted because of the experiences we'd had. The team used to hang out there all the time. By privilege and grace, we're given opportunities to be there alone and do different things, have meetings and investigate and conduct experiments, all that. So we were really lucky to be able to be there. So we were in a building known for its haunting lore and legends, let alone all its history. And most people went home. One person giving the instruction stayed downstairs. And myself and another team member and the team leader at the time walked around the home with this new person. I think we were just having a conversation, like what do you think? I have just probably a lot, but if this is something you want to do, this is the house. You can probably tell in the ghost stories and stuff. And it's not like I'm some sort of empath or, I'm extra special at reading people's behavior. I'm just going to tell you straight up, like you could kind of tell this person had some apprehension, and this was all quite new, fascinating, and astounding to them. I think anyone human could have read that off this person if they were witnessing this. So it was definitely, at least what I thought at first, quite exciting for them to be able to be in this place and with these people and potentially being able to participate in the paranormal, right? That's how it starts. We get upstairs, and I remember, I think we were getting closer to or explaining about a particular hot spot, of paranormal activity in the building, and this person starts getting more apprehensive and kind of backing away from the space. Nothing was occurring. There wasn't anything particularly unnerving. I did speak to one of the other investigators, and they said they recalled that the place didn't feel quite right that night. This has merit because it's the kind of environment that if you've ever investigated or had an experience where an environment feels like it changes without any external reason whatsoever, but the entire feeling around you alters, this is the kind of, it's sensible in some way. I'm not a psychologist, so we're not going into the upper level terminology here, but you can feel the vibe shift this location is one of those. So I have to say, in explaining this, maybe that occurred and this person started to pick up on that. But I don't know, and I do have my doubts, because what I really think was happening was overwhelm and intrigue without any emotional control whatsoever. Because it went from this person acting really apprehensive about going in or to certain parts of the building to them speaking as though they weren't themselves. I think so far I've described this in a way that makes it sound believable, but if I've given any context, it's keep in mind this person had never had any experience whatsoever with, structured investigation. And they'd never been to this location. So the ability to say, well, that means this could be a very real thing is going to, some people are going to think that. And there's going to be other people who think, well, they just wanted the attention. I can't quantify that, and I can't qualify. I can't to this day. I'm not going to know. And they seemed to get really wide-eyed and almost fearful looking. And it's not as though this person was incapable of communicating. They were talking all the way through it, but they were starting to say things almost not like third person, but I statements that sound like they're trying to sound like someone who lived in the house in the past. We had gone over the what we think or who we think might be here, all of those definitive but never provable statements about the paranormal activity in a place you get to make. And I think at this point, myself and the other investigator were having a moment of going, what is happening here? Because this person was only speaking to the person who was the team leader at the time, and they were speaking back to them. And it went from statements of fear and awe into almost defiance, like they were having a bit of like a pissing contest back and forth of, are you really possessed or are you trying to prove it? And the investigator played along, talking with this person as though they were possessed, but there was such a weird, strange expression on both their faces that it made me like, this is where the part where my insides cringed, because I'm like, what the frick was happening here? What was I witnessing? And I remember I was standing across from the other investigator, and I think we made glances of eye contact at each other that just said, what the fuck? And because of when it was and the less amount of experience I had at that time investigating, being on this team or being in these types of situations, I don't think I had the emotional understanding or the confidence to navigate it better or with any sense of control, because at that time I didn't feel in control. With where I was in my beliefs and the interpersonal relationships on that team, I felt like I did not have control, but was still trying to maintain it. And that can happen with really dysfunctional relationships with people. So that's what was going on with me at that time. So I can think back to me then in this memory and know that I didn't have a way to stop or navigate this, but this pissing contest of statements back and forth between the investigator and this new person got weirder, and the person started moving around and started acting out a little strange. And suddenly they go over to the banister of this second floor, and it's original, centuries old structure that we're in that is priceless. And they start gripping the handrail so hard and saying things like they wanted to jump, or something's telling them to jump, telling them to go over. And it looked to me like, one, we're about to have a major priceless liability lawsuit on our hands if something's damaged on our watch in this structure. Two, this person is potentially in, I'm not even saying spiritual danger here, like danger here. We're at a danger point. They're going to act they're already acting unpredictable, because this is in no way predictable. Whether it's fake or real, this is in no way predictable behavior. This is already unnerving. This is already starting to get too strange for any sort of normal intervention. So I couldn't intervene and go, all right, that's enough. We're going downstairs. Looks like everybody's got to go outside and take a break, get the spirit out. I couldn't do that then. And when you think back to yourself and you got all those memories where you're like, well, I would have done this differently. Obviously, all of us have thousands of those racked up in our brain, ready to go at the most inopportune moments to remember, right? This is one, right? So this is one. This person was acting as if they were possessed by a spirit of the house that they had just walked into, just learned about. And it was so sudden and so dramatic and so strange that my memory actually comes to a bit of a blank as to how this person came out of this alleged trance. And I say this because from my perspective, it was like being involved in improv, but nobody's trying to make it work. Everyone's trying to make their own scene. You know what I mean? So somehow this person came out of that or broke away from that, and everybody went downstairs and they were able to go home. And I even remember the person, who has all the information, training in spiritualism and mediumship, saying, this is not safe and not good. This didn't go well. Wouldn't you believe it? That was absolutely not the last time I worked with that person who listen, I'm gonna leave. I have no choice but to leave this open for objectivity. Truly, this person who believes perhaps they were possessed, this person who was perhaps possessed briefly, or this person who acted in such a way in order to garner attention and to be part of something bigger than themselves within a paranormal and occult context. But I wanted to relay this, one, because time is going by, my memory, I don't know, maybe my brain is going smooth. I need to get it out there while it's still in there, And then because I think it's a damn common situation when it comes to people working together in groups in the paranormal, whether it's at an event, people with a parasocial relationship. There's so much unpredictability within this and within groups. And when you have extremely fertile brain space to absorb this information and the possibilities of something so big, it could be equated to damn near magical. Someone might have the ability to communicate with dead people. Oh, do tell me. There's people who are going to go, oh my God. And they want all of that information. They want to be part of that. So again, I'm not a psychologist, and if you are, maybe you should call me. Not that if you call, I'm going to pick up. You'd do well in a DM or a comment. But as I'm not a psychologist, it's hard for me to articulate how the motivations of people in these different situations come from, where it comes from, how it comes about, because I've only witnessed it from the position I'm in, from the perspective I'm in. It didn't happen to me. I don't feel like I've ever really been possessed, truly. I don't have one of those stories. I don't carry that. So I don't know if this new person attempting to join a team was acting that, or if they believed that, if they wanted us to believe that. I'm not gonna know, but I think it's damn astounding psychologically how easily and unpredictably a person's behavior can change, their mindset can move within the context of the paranormal. And it's not just while holding a recorder, investigating, asking questions, just within being in some of these spaces, knowing what we know about some of these spaces, the possibilities of the legends, the capabilities of even the most pop culture out there examples of the paranormal, like the movies Paranormal Activity. We love them, where they're campy, they're a little much, they're a lot much, let's be real. But from even that extreme, all of that can affect a person. So when they walk into actual situations within an unknown factor, the factor of the weird, the other, the could a ghost pop, what could happen to me? When they walk into a situation like that, sometimes it can go this way, and this is hard to watch. It can end bad. I wish I'd said something sooner as the situation was unfolding, because we were seconds from something irreplaceable and centuries old being broken. And I would never know if it was because a ghost possessed somebody, something possessed somebody, or if it was just the weirdest night of improv I've ever been a part of. There's only one other portion that I'm like, I wish this new potential team member never walked in for this lesson on spiritualism and mediumship and psychic abilities, because I think all of that information within a matter of an hour or two was too much for this person to handle. And when taken right into the darkness, the space where these things happen, and being in the surrounding of it, I wonder if it wasn't actually a situation where that kind of information damaged somebody. It was bad, and it wasn't meant to be bad. That's the thing. It was just sharing knowledge, sharing a part of a person's belief system in their existence. But this is what happened with it. And it's really difficult to navigate because of the unpredictability of it. You can't see the danger. You can only wonder if the person's really feeling it. And that's a possible possession story. I'm Full Dark Amy. Thanks for listening to Extra Weird Insight. This has been Eidolon episode 8. Stay weird.